Hello, everyone. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to the Facebook Developer Garage. My name is Emina Belriti. I'm from Morocco. So I'm really, really excited for us to be here. I'm really excited to tell you a little bit about what the Facebook platform is all about, what we do, Stephane and myself, and hopefully just kind of hear a little bit more from you as well. We are here to tell you about what we do, but more importantly, hear from you on what's on your mind, what questions you have, and most importantly, hear a little bit about what projects you're working on. And we've been talking to a few folks already about some of the things that they're building on the Facebook platform. So that's really what we're here to do. But before that, let me tell you quickly what I do at Facebook. So I look after our platform partnerships group here in the region. The region for us is actually quite big. It's Eastern Europe, it's the Middle East, and it's Africa. So it's a pretty broad part of EMEA. It's the MEA part, I guess I would say. And the reason we're here and why it's so important is because the Middle East matters. The Middle East is huge for us on Facebook, both in terms of the sheer number of users that are actually using the Facebook platform at any point in time, but also in terms of the potential of what we see in terms of what companies can do building on top of Facebook. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception, and you'll hear more from Stephane about what the Facebook platform is. But for some people, the Facebook platform is what you see as a user. It's how you interact with Facebook on the web, on mobile, inside of an application, or inside of the mobile web browser. For some people, especially on the brand side or the company side, it's about a marketing platform, right? It's how do I reach my users in new and interesting ways. And what we'll tell you a little bit more about now is how you as a company, right, whether you are a small startup or whether you're a major company, how you can get social and what that means and what are some of the benefits, essentially, of doing that. Mostly it'll be around how you use Facebook as a discovery engine, as a monetization engine, and as an engagement engine. That's really what we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about essentially what I would say is probably the most important evolution of the Facebook platform since we launched in 2007. So in 2007, Facebook made available the social graph, which is that very core asset that allows you to build using a person's social graph, the people and the things that they're interested in. We made that available for other people because we knew we couldn't build all the interesting products. That was 2007. We're now several years later, and this, I think, is the next big, major evolution, and that is what we call the open graph. Let me just see a show of hands. How many people have already enabled Timeline as a user? OK, all right, so a lot of people. What we'll tell you about today is how you actually, as a developer, can start to engage with users on what we call their timeline applications, right? So you'll hear a little bit about how folks like Pinterest or The Guardian or games also have built on this. And then we'll tell you a little bit more about how you think about this cross-platform. Because it's not enough to be thinking simply on the web. It's really about thinking web and mobile. So that's it from me. I just wanted to say hello. You'll hear more from me on Friday during the forum days. I'll pass it over to Stephane, who is our partner engineer on the team. He's the guy who makes the magic happen in terms of actually building this stuff. So we look forward to hearing from you. Don't hesitate to ask questions. And I'm really excited to see, hopefully, the next Zynga or the next Spotify, hopefully, come out of the region. So that's my challenge to you. Let's see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. So my name is Stephane, and as Mina said, I'm a partner engineer. My role is to help our strategic partners in the region, and I'm covering Europe, to succeed on the Facebook platform, building applications. And for us, succeed means millions of users. So let's start with, so I have three things I want to say today. First is a recap on the Facebook platform, what it is. I was told that maybe it would be a good idea to go this introduction talk. Then I'll talk about the Open Graph, which is one of the priorities for the company, and then I'll conclude by the mobile platform. So let's jump in. When we talk about social design on Facebook, and the earlier talk was about UX, and I think that this is really complementary to UX, because if you build a good UX, good app, the next question is, how do I distribute that? And for us, distribution comes with social design. So social design is about building on the principles of how people interact with each other. Okay? There's a book on this. that's called Grouped by Paul Adams. And what Paul says basically describes social design and social interactions through social media networks through four key principles. The first one is how people, is that people want to talk to each other. They want to talk, they want to share information, but sharing is just a means to an end. What they really want to do is to build a conversation, to exchange ideas. Second point is, why do people talk, right? Why do we talk? We're social beings, we're social animals. We do talk, and we talk for different reasons, but we talk to share, and we talk to help each other. We talk to exchange ideas, but mostly we talk as a way to present ourselves to others. So this is how we manage perceptions by others. Third point is that we talk about few things in reality. We talk about other people. We talk about feelings. We don't really talk about facts, right? Because, oh, I think that I'm not feeling good, or I think this is not working well, or I think this is too long, etc., etc. And then we talk about things that surround us. And then the fourth and the last point is who we talk about. Basically, we talk about people that are close to us. We talk to our friends. We talk to anybody that we know. So the basic principles of social design is to build on this. And if you build on this, you build in a scenario, in a situation where you will foster communication between people, between their friends. And today, on social networks, such as Facebook, using that leverage can help you distribute your application to people and their friends, and to create re-engagement channels so that people come back to your app. So this is what we talk about when we talk about social design, and we have built a platform to allow you to leverage that. So the platform components, I'll breeze through this really quickly. Just to recap, in case some of you don't really know what we mean when we talk about platform. When we talk about platform on Facebook, there are few components highlighted there. Pages on the top is for brands to create communities, to create a presence on the Facebook platform, and to get people to talk about them, create a fan base, etc. Then we have social plugins. Social plugins are small widgets like the like button, the comment box, the login button, the recommendation bar. Lots of them exist today that are very easily embeddable in your website without even you implementing login or anything else. As long as the user is connected to Facebook, you can use social plugins. Open Graph we'll talk about extensively. Then you have Canvas. Canvas is where you will build application on Facebook. Most game developers leverage that, but not only. Mobile, we'll talk about mobile later, so I'll just keep that aside. Credits is the payment side, in-app purchase, how you would be able to leverage Facebook credits to have your users buy stuff, virtual goods mainly. And then ads and insights are platform components for marketeers to build campaigns and measure how successful it is. So today, we're going to talk about these two pieces. And these two pieces are key for developers building on the Facebook platform, and we really consider them top priorities for the company. So let's drill into plugins. You've seen those. The like button, the send button, recommendation bar, the register button for registering new users based on Facebook identity, and go on, so on and so forth. We provide SDKs for developers. We provide 4 SDKs that we support fully. We've decided to deprecate the other SDKs that we were working on because we wanted to focus on this one and build top quality SDKs. So we have the JS SDK, PHP SDK for server-side, and we have 2 SDKs for native apps on Android and iOS. Next, one thing you need to know when you build on Facebook is something we call the dev app or the app manager. So if you go to developers.facebook.com/apps, you get into this UI where you can create a new app. And in return, you get an ID, which we call app ID, and you can start building applications. The app ID is really the identity of your app. It is the key component that you will use to authenticate and authorize users so that you can do stuff. Then come Graph API. So Graph API is an API REST base that you can use to query the Facebook app, the Facebook graph. I'm sorry. So you could get access to information as long as the user has authorized your app. So we always bound the query results by the privacy level that the user provided. But it's a very simple API that you can call. You get REST, you get JSON-based return, and you can also get other type of returns. There's another API called FQL, which is very similar to SQL. We just call it the Facebook query language. And you will formulate queries like this, also through the Graph API, but you will specify you want an SQL query. And again, this returns you some results based on the privacy settings that the user set. Now, a couple of tools you need to know. One is called the Graph Explorer. And the Graph Explorer is available at this URL here on developersfacebook.com/tools/explorer. And it's basically a UI that allows you to query the graph. So you can make Facebook calls, Graph API calls against this tool to query information from Facebook, so that you don't have to develop complex tools just to test. Another one, which is a debugger. And we'll use this one later on, as well as the Graph Explorer. Basically, the debugger is just a way for you to enter a URL, and we test it, we lint it, and we extract the metadata information that Facebook understands so that you can see and know what to expect. We'll go through these tools through the demo. I just wanted to highlight them here to make sure that, you know, when we talk about these later, at least you have some context. So really quickly, some recap on the platform. Just wanted to make sure that you're aware of these things and you can go back later. What I really wanted to talk about is first the Open Graph. So in 2007, we introduced this notion of platform. You can do a lot of stuff. But now we're talking about the Open Graph, which is the evolution. And to us, the Open Graph is a way for you to contribute to the graph, the Facebook graph, but also benefit from distribution and also re-engagement from the users. And the way I like to think about the graph on Facebook is it's a huge graph database. So contrary to relational database, graph databases are good at querying and storing connections. So we have nodes and connections. Users and objects are nodes, and we connect them together through things that we call edges. So here's a node. That's a person, and that's me. I'm in the center of my graph. Here's other nodes. They're all also people, and they're connected to me. In the Facebook world, people connected to each other are called friends. Great, yes. Other nodes, objects. And these objects are connected to people. So until now, objects connected to people in Facebook are done through the like button. So people could like the thing. So until now, in Facebook, people can be friends with people and people can like stuff, which is kind of cool, but we wanted to take it a step further. And we really wanted to allow people to express more abilities. So starting with Open Graph, people can listen to stuff. People can read stuff. People can eat stuff. You name it. You know, just invent your verb, your action, and link them to stuff. And in fact, it's not just stuff, because people listen to music. They listen to albums. They listen to songs. Albums have songs. These are typed objects. And you, as a software developer, you will be able to specify information and property about these typed objects. So let's drill into this concept of the Open Graph. With Open Graph, we also introduced our new profile page that used to be called the wall, and now it's called Timeline. And on Timeline, we surface interesting information about you. So, you know, the stories you share, the stuff that you like, people that you are friends with, places where you checked in, and also stuff that you do, because it's cool that you could like things, but it's even cooler if you could do things on the Facebook platform. And we surface this here. The reason we call it timeline is because it goes back in time. And you could see, whoa, this goes so fast. You could see that there's a bunch of information up there, like applications I use, like running application, cooking application, lots of different apps. And we also enable custom applications to shine on users' timeline through these things that we call aggregation unit. And this is an aggregation unit from an app called Soundcloud, and we'll talk about Soundcloud a bit later. But here we surface interesting information about SoundCloud during of my usage of SoundCloud in March. And those are songs I listened to, and there's a recap. The good news is that as application developers, you control this. You are the one who control what's inside your aggregation unit for your app, and you decide how this information is presented on Facebook, on users' timeline. So this is your chance to shine inside of users' timeline. Let's look at some examples of applications that I think have been successful in the Facebook platform during the past month. And we chose a few applications that are different in terms of the profile of the developer. So Guardian is a UK-based newspaper. What they do is news. They have a website, and they do have developers to work on the website, but basically they're a newspaper. They decided to build a timeline app with Facebook and integrate the Open Graph. Since they started 5 months ago, they grew from 0 to nearly 4 million users monthly, so active users. That's pretty impressive. Another example, Goodreads. Goodreads is an application. They have a mobile version, they have a web version, and it's about describing your taste in reading. So you could rate books, you could tell people what you read, you could read stuff, etc. And you could build your book collection or library. And Goodreads increased their daily active user number by 70% since they launched end of January. And how they did this, they built a timeline app, they integrated with the Open Graph. Another one, Pinterest. So Pinterest is getting a lot of momentum right now. If you're a woman, you live in the US, there's a good chance that you use Pinterest. And that's are the stats that we see. And my friend Stephane Crozatier uses Pinterest, so go figure, maybe he's lying about his sex. Anyways, Pinterest has seen a lot of increase in user base since they joined Facebook on the Timeline app. And effectively, there's something we call referrals, which is when a user clicks on a link from Facebook that refers back to their app. And they've seen 60% increase in referrals. So that's cool, because this is what we call distribution. This is how you get more users, by having stuff shown on Facebook and having your friends click on those links so that they, in their turn, can go to your app, right? So let's drill down into this. Open Graph, basically, how do you write to the graph? Pretty easy. There's a REST API, HTTP based, so as long as your developer environment supports, speaking HTTP, which basically everybody does now, you can write to the graph. So desktop web, mobile web, native app, you can write to the graph. And we're not stingy. We allow you to read from the graph as well. And we distribute from the graph to your application, regardless of whether they're native, mobile web, desktop web. And from reading from the graph is from using the same REST-based API. Let's take an example. SoundCloud, that's a Berlin-based startup. They built their application on the basis that people like to share music and people like to collaborate in building music. So you take some sounds from here and there, you mix them up, and then suddenly you have a good song that people can download. So in their application, they have objects that are sounds or mixes. And they have actions or verbs that are play a sound. So you can play a sound. You can like a sound. You can post a sound, which is the verb they use for when a user uploads a sound on SoundCloud, etc., etc. You get the picture. And in SoundCloud, whenever you listen to a sound or a mix or music, they publish that to the graph. And they do so from every platform. Desktop web, mobile web app, they publish to the graph. iOS app, whenever you listen to a sound on SoundCloud, they publish to the graph. Android native app, they publish to the cloud. And they also have an an OS X app that they just released that also publishes to the graph. And when they do that, Facebook surfaces those actions throughout different channels. In Ticker, if you have Ticker, you might see some activities from your friends that are Open Graph stories. And here is the newsfeed where I see that my friend Simon liked the sound on SoundCloud, and it surfaces here. What I can do when I see this, maybe I can comment on it, I can like the story, but I can also click on either the app or the sound, and I'm redirecting to SoundCloud. And boom, I'm a new user, right? And Simon has lots of friends, and his friends has lots of friends. And suddenly you're a successful app because you've done that. Other areas where we surface those informations are on timeline. So on Simon's timeline, if I go down, I can see that, hey, Simon liked the sound. And here you see the same story surfaced in a different way. And again, Simon's friends can click on it, can comment on it, can interact with it. You can also go to Simon's timeline app view for SoundCloud, where you have all the aggregation units that SoundCloud built that are shown here. And you see a recap of all his recent activities on SoundCloud. And you can go back in time and see whatever he's done since the beginning of his Facebook time on SoundCloud. And here you see the same story again. Okay? This also works, folks, with iOS native. So if you use the native Facebook app on iOS and you see a newsfeed story about Simon listening to a sound on SoundCloud, you click on it, we do deep linking and relaunch the SoundCloud app, and we pass in the URL so that they can show the sound. And guess what? If the SoundCloud app is not installed, we direct the user to the app marketplace. And there can install the app, and boom, user again. We do the same for Android, native, and web app. We direct to the marketplace or directly to the app as well. Okay? So there you go. This is the basic of distribution on the Facebook platform using Open Graph. And it's really, really powerful. We work on this every day with partners. We try to focus on the strategic partners that have lots of volume, and we make them even more successful. And we see this from a first-hand experience. It's really successful, and it's about creating viral loops. Because if you can build an open graph, what we can do is put your app in front of 850 million users and growing. So how do you do that? It's pretty simple, but there are things that you need to do correctly to make it right. First, actually 4 things. First, you model your data. It's like when you want to create a storage for your app, you have to model your data through a database. And modeling in Open Graph is kind of the same. You have user action objects. User does something pointing to stuff, to an object. So for SoundCloud, object is sound, and action is like, is upload, or I don't remember how they call it. It's listen or play. And you model your data through the app dev that I was talking about earlier, and you create an object type. You say which properties you want to support. Then you create action types, and you connect those actions to objects. And then suddenly you can call the Graph API to publish those actions against the objects. And we'll see that in a demo. Second thing I'm looking at the time because I have lots of content. Second step you need to do is design your timeline aggregations. And this is important because you really want people to look at information that makes sense for you on their timeline. And people spend a lot of time on their own timeline, but also their friends' timeline. So it's important to get those aggregations right, and we'll see how we can build one together. It's pretty simple because it's declarative and through point and click. Third thing, very important, you need to mark up your objects. So each instance of a song on SoundCloud or a sound on SoundCloud is an object. It needs to be published on the web, and it needs to be public because whenever Facebook needs to find more information about an object, we will go and scrap the page. We will parse the page. We'll look at some meta tag that we understand because you told us, hey, the sound has a duration. The sound has an author. An author is a Facebook ID, so we can point them to the profile, etc., etc. And we'll try to find that information, scrapping your page, so there's some metadata that you'll need to put in. And if you don't put in the correct metadata, publishing the action will fail. Last thing you need to do is to publish the action. And you do so by calling graph.facebook.com, which is a graph API endpoint, /me, which is the user, / the action type. And the naming is namespace, specific to your app, and action name. And you pass in a parameter. The parameter is the second line in yellow there. Here it's a cooking app, so the first parameter, and maybe there's only one, in this case there's only one, it's recipe, and recipe points to a URL that's available publicly on the web that has been tagged with the recipe tags correctly. And then you need to pass in a user access token that gives that the user have granted permissions to your application so that you can publish actions on their behalf. Okay? 4 steps. Model your data, create your aggregation units, and tag your objects, and then publish actions. Pretty simple. So let me see. Yeah, maybe we can hack this together, but I'll just keep some time at the end to do the demo because it's kind of not super convenient hiding behind the podium here. So I'll just bring a chair and I'll sit down at the end and do the hack. And you'll see it's pretty simple. So far, so good? Okay? Don't fall asleep on me, guys. What we can do as well is that I've prepared the tooling so that whoever wants to do the demo along with me, and I'll try to go slowly, you can follow through and you can create your basic first Open Graph app as well. So shows of hand, who wants to do that? Or you're just too tired to and want to have dinner? Okay, a few people. We'll do that at the end. And you'll see it's pretty easy. So next up, the Facebook mobile platform. And when I talk about Facebook mobile platform, people are just like, huh? What are you talking about? So yeah, maybe we can have a 5-minute Q&A before we go to the next step. Q&A about Open Graph and just a very early discussion introduction. And if there's no question, we can dive into the mobile platform and have a larger Q&A at the end. Okay, question, and I repeat. Do you want to go ahead. Or maybe just wait for the mic.
Hi, I'm not a technical person, but are you going to do that? I mean, is it similar for a person who has a timeline to do what you're going to do later on with a page online, basically? Recently, you've done the page timeline, and does it apply? Is it the same thing?
Yeah, okay, so the question is, does this apply the same way to page timeline and profile timeline?
Yes.
And the answer is today, no. apps are only available for people because people do stuff. Brand pages right now, we don't have the mechanism for them to do stuff. And on Facebook, we strongly believe that, or we firmly believe that things happen when you use, people's identity. So some of you, I know some of you have fake profiles. Just delete them. We don't want that on Facebook. And if you don't, we will do. We want real identity. And we believe that when people do stuff on behalf of their real identity, then stuff happens and their friends interact with it. And right now we don't have that mechanism for brand pages. Maybe we'll do something, but right now it's mainly about people's profile.
About the sort of the second question, which is it possible for brands to have a timeline? The answer is yes, right? So while you can't do what we were just describing, which is, the interaction, right, that we're actually talking about timeline applications, because we don't imagine brands taking these actions, you can, though, as a brand, create a timeline, and you can sort of have the same level of experience, essentially, that you'd have as a user, just not without, I guess, this particular experience, because brands don't do stuff. So it depends what you're talking about, right? So if you are sort of, I don't know, Coke or Pepsi, right? There aren't necessarily very many actions that you could imagine, right? I drank a Coke, or that level of interaction is quite different than, what Stephane was just describing when a user takes an action like listening to music or reading an article or watching a film or a video, right? Those are much more meaningful, and that's really what we're focused on at this stage. That said, partners, for example, in the commerce space. So if you are, a big commerce company, retail, right, you can imagine creating what we call custom actions, like Amina wants, an object, or Amina, sort of just bought, right, or owns something. There are situations where that might make sense. It just depends, right? It depends kind of what kind of brand you are. But there are definitely circumstances where that would make a lot of sense. The way we think about it is from the user standpoint. Do I want to see this in my newsfeed, right? If I want or I own something, yeah, maybe I do. If I just consume something, maybe that's less relevant. That's what you want to think about. Other questions? No questions? That's not possible. So you guys all have timeline apps that have been built and ready to go?
Well, one question. This applies only to timeline-enabled profiles, correct?
For what, pardon?
Timeline-enabled profiles only.
Yes. Well, there's today and there's before. So we talked about this thing since September last year, and through an event we called F8. And at that moment, timeline was not enabled for everybody, but we already had some applications, like the music apps or some video apps that were very available. So at that point, we enabled some applications to publish actions on profiles of users that don't have timeline enabled. But since we launched this officially end of January, today, if a user wants to use an Open Graph application or a timeline application, this will enable timeline for them automatically.
Using only the JavaScript SDK, because using other SDKs, it doesn't.
Yeah, we can go into the details about that.
Just double checking. Thank you.
But the end goal, and here it is, guys, everybody will have timeline enabled on Facebook. Okay, so for those of you who say, oh no, I don't want to change. Yeah, someday we'll, sorry. I want to be stuck in the past. There was another question over there, or not? Over there.
There's one here also. I'm basically interested in data mining and visualizing some data. So what I want to ask you, there has always been this feel that Facebook is a walled garden. Lately, I've seen like RSS subscriptions available. So I just want to ask you, while programming on Facebook, what are the things that I can aggregate or get out of Facebook to build data mines, and what are the things that you really keep inside, so I should not consider them? And how easy is it to get data out of Facebook now? because I'm not following up closely, but I know there are exceptions, for example.
That's a good question. I mean, the way to think about it is, from a policy standpoint, right, there's a very bright line about when you can actually use the data from Facebook. And the answer is very clear. It's when you've actually asked permission to the user. And the second is when you are actually using that data to make the experience for the user better in some way. That can be on your site, inside of your experience, or it can be within, an application inside of Facebook. But the point is, what we do not like and what we will continue to crack down on in terms of policy are folks who are taking information from the user and then using it to promote or to market something completely different than what the user signed up for, right? So if I'm, using a travel application and all of a sudden I get an email from the company that also happens to own, some other kind of service, right, a gaming service, and I'm getting sort of contacted because of the information that I provided, that's wrong. That's the kind of stuff that we do not like. The reality is, as long as you are using this information to augment or to improve the experience for the consumer, you're allowed to do it. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add that we should continue the presentation and then take a Q&A at the end again. Yeah? Okay. Last one.
Okay. It's two-parted question.
Two questions.
It's really tiny one, a little bit technical. The width of the tabs on the new timeline. I did read that there's a new width size. It used to be 520, now there is 810. Is that applied or not? Can I make a new tab with a width of 810 pixels right now?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yes.
We can check it out later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a new icon for tabs. In the past, we used to have a small icon that is on the left.
Yeah.
Now, when I put my tabs, it's like a big picture, but it shows like new thingy. How can I customize it? Can you show us that?
So right now with timeline for we're sidetracking a little bit. With timeline for brands and pages, the concept a little bit different. Right now, what you do and marketers do that, and agencies do that. They create tabs, welcome tabs. They have huge picture applications that if the user didn't like the page, it will show a different content that will try to trap the user into clicking like. That's a bad experience for us. And they have arrows pointing the like button so that people, So with timeline for brands, this will have to change. We'll have to find other ways to engage users, create fan base, and not trap them into liking the page, but putting interesting information so that they will willfully go and subscribe to the information. So things are changing, and we just have to together just find out what the right and the best way is with the new stuff. So I'm happy to take more at the end, and we can have a private discussion about that if you want to. Facebook mobile platform. So the mobile platform, what do we mean when we talk about the mobile platform? First, let's look at some numbers. Facebook took 8 years to have approximately 850 million users active. And it took us 4 years to get to 425 million users active on mobile. And it tells a lot about how the ecosystem progresses. So here, shows of hand, who has a smartphone? Okay, let's say everybody. Who doesn't use Facebook on their smartphone? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, minority. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just you should install Facebook on your smartphone. Anyway, the mobile platform. When we talk about mobile platform, it's really what we really mean is that all the social channels that are available on desktop web, on the traditional Facebook, are also available on Facebook mobile. So we have different instantiation of Facebook mobile. We have what we call the M site, m.facebook.com, which is the mobile website. We have the iOS native app. We have the Android native apps. And all these channels are available on those platforms. So when a user logs in to Facebook on a mobile device, well, they have stream distribution on their feed. They see friends posting stuff. They see apps posting stuff. They can search for apps. They can see apps bookmarked on their left side menu. They can send requests, receive notifications. And whenever a user clicks on a link or interacts with that application, they get redirected to the application. So we provide distribution exactly the same way as we do on desktop web. And if you think about the 425 million people who use Facebook on a very regular basis on mobile, it's a huge opportunity for you. So think about this a little bit. Lots of people using that, but then mobile is pretty fragmented as an ecosystem. So I'm using an iPhone, but my friends might not be using an iPhone. So how do you build an app that gets distribution regardless of the type of device they will be using? Well, the short answer is you cannot do everything. So we chose a few platforms that we think are the most relevant. And we chose to concentrate on these platforms here to distribute to your app. So we have web apps based on HTML5. As long as you build on WebKit enabled, for WebKit enabled web browser, we will distribute to your app exactly the same way as on desktop. And then we have 2 SDKs for native, Android and iOS, and we support them and we open source them, so you can also go and look at how things are built. And for these 3 platforms, we distribute traffic and referrals to your app the same way. And we'll look at some examples and some things that, like the do's and don't do's. We support the 2 Android and iOS native SDKs. So let's go and talk about authentication, which is probably the most important piece, because for Facebook and arguably for your app using Facebook, an unauthenticated user is kind of useless. He's anonymous. It's hard to, it's not hard, it's impossible to publish actions on his behalf. It's impossible to create good distribution mechanisms and use the social channels. So authentication, it's key. And in the industry, we call that single sign-on. It's the fact that you can authenticate without typing your login and password and reuse some authentication already on Facebook. So the user has Facebook, he uses it, and then he goes on and uses another application. What if you could reuse the Facebook ID and credentials in your app? And this is what we do through SSO. And by doing that, you could target 500 million and growing mobile users. You could get extended permissions if the user allows you to post actions, if the user allows you to access his friends' information, etc. And then you can use the social channels provided by Facebook. So for me, it's really annoying to have to type in my user password on a small device. I know who loves that, but I don't. And I've already logged into Facebook, and we've seen that most people have Facebook on their smartphone already, so why don't we use that authentication mechanism? And if you see this screen, which is a Facebook login password screen on a custom app, and it's a bad application, don't use that app. Just send them feedback so that they can use SSO. Let's get rid of this guy. So here's how it looks like. I have, Facebook app installed on this device, and there's an app called Wishlist on the top. And I click on Wishlist. And you see there's a login button. I log in, flip-flop into Facebook and out of Facebook, and there you go. I'm authenticated, and, well, it's my friend Arié. But, and then you have permissions to do stuff on his behalf, so you can access his friend's information. You can publish to the graph. And he has already authenticated this app earlier. So no login password required, and you have an identity that you can use. This is very, very important, because it's the basic of distribution and virality on Facebook. A user is authenticated. He does stuff. His friends see stuff. They click on stuff, and they end up in your app. Okay? Next. The way you configure your mobile application and connect it to your web application or root application is through this UI screen here in the dev app. And you should really think about sharing the same application ID throughout the different platforms so that when you authenticate the user on desktop web, it's the same app ID on native iOS or Android or mobile web, and you will have access to the same set of permissions. And also referrals will be attributed to the same applications. Next up, mobile distribution. So how does distribution work? We have, as long as you integrate with SSO, you get stuff for free. So you get bookmarking. If I use Magic LAN a lot on the web, and then I go on my iPhone or my Android phone, this bookmark will be there. And if I click on it, I will be redirected to the App Store, and I can download the mobile version of this one. Foursquare is another example. And all the Open Graph stories will also appear in Newsfeed, in mobile Newsfeed, so we can refer traffic back to your site or to your app whenever a user clicks on that. Traffic referrals. It's pretty easy, right? On desktop, there's a story on Newsfeed. Some guy clicks on it. He gets redirected to the web app. Plain and simple. It's the basic of how it works. Now, on mobile, well, it's as simple as that. Mobile web, click on the link in the browser. We open a new tab or new page. We redirect the traffic to your page. And then, if the user is authenticated, you can do stuff. If he's not, maybe you should think about enabling SSO or authenticating them. With native apps, the good news is that you have a setting in the dev app that allows deep linking. And you can create this situation where in the native iOS or Android app, a user clicks on a link, and we redirect to the native app. And again, if the native app is not installed, we redirect the user to the App Store. Okay? Now, it's not so easy because there's something else that we call shallow linking. And shallow linking is bad because the default behavior, and this is default because we know that not everybody can implement it. The default behavior is that when we redirect the user to the app, then it's the app's responsibility to find out, hey, which object it is, which page should I open, which UI screen should I show. And by default, if you don't handle this well, you end up in the home page of the app or whatever start UI that you usually provide, and it's a bad user experience because the user clicked on a specific link. Cool. He clicked on cool here. And he wants to end up in cool and not on your home page. So shallow linking is bad. And how do you configure this? It's pretty simple. Today we enable it for iOS. So you have to enable SSO, and then you enable deep linking. And what this does is, when we launch the iOS app, we pass in the URL of the object, and you can open the right page. We're working on enabling this on Android as well, so stay tuned. You'll have exactly the same type of settings for Android. And then some other stuff on mobile that also exists, like the social plugins. We have the like button. We have the comment plugin that also exists if you want to embed this on your web page. Graph API calls work the same way on mobile than on desktop web. It's just a HTTP REST call. Using dialogues, we've wrapped the dialogue calls into some nice API calls depending on whether you use iOS or Android, and we enable you to use most of the dialogue that exists already on the web. And you could do the same experience. Requests is interesting. This is something that most game developers do very well, and we start to see this in non-game applications as well. And request is basically a way for an application to allow me to make a request to my friends. So here, I'm making a request to Arie, and I'm showing some text message. And when Arie logs in, or even if he's not logged into Facebook, he's on his mobile phone with Facebook installed, there's a notification popping up saying that, hey, your friend sent you a request. And you didn't have to program against the iOS request API or notification API, I'm sorry. And when he logs into Facebook, he gets a notification jewel popping up, and he can get information about that. He clicks on the link. Guess what? He's redirected to the app or the authentication dialog if he wasn't a user of the app before. And then he can use the app, and boom, you've got a new user. And this is what games developers do really well, and this is what allows you to, like, the Zyngas of this world. And this is one of the different mechanisms they use to create distribution through the Facebook social channels. We'll end the presentation here. And for those of you who, let me check time. Good. For those of you who wanted to follow through building an Open Graph application, we'll do it right now. And for those of you who don't want to, code, you can just watch and you'll see it's really, really easy. We'll start by going to, I don't know, maybe I'll just hide behind my little cubicle here. We'll start by going to developers.facebook.com, and we'll go to the app tab up there. And when you do this, you end up in your application settings, and you can go here and click on Create New App, and then at this point you can create a new application. So we'll build a new app very easily. We'll have to go through some few challenges, and you'll see. Let's create an app called ArabNet, valid. Don't use the same because it's unique, and you'll get me in the trouble of trying to find a unique name. App namespace, just the same. It needs to be unique. And no hosting. Now it failed. So the namespace is just a prefix that we use to make sure that the actions are unique and scoped. Here's a challenge. CAPTCHA. Try different words. This one seems okay. Toba. Is that an M? M-I? Let's see. Am I a machine? Can I guess what's written up there? Okay, yes, success. Right, so we've just created an app very easily. And we've specified a namespace here, and you could use whatever namespace you want to. And what we'll do next is that we'll go to the Open Graph section on the left. We'll click that, and then you get into a wizard. So in this app, we'll do like something that we like to do in demos. We do a recipe, a cooking application. So we'll have an action called cook. And what do we cook? We cook recipes, okay? So what can people do in this application? They can cook. Next, what do they cook? We have some default objects that pop up there. We'll create some custom one. We'll cook a recipe. And then I click Get Started, the green button. So now it's creating the objects in the background, and it will show me some kind of UI to prompt me to confirm all that and pass in additional options. It's usually pretty fast. I don't know what's going on here. While it does that, maybe let's continue with this screen. So here's a recap. It's a wizard that recaps what the actions you specified. And on Facebook, whenever you publish an action, your friends will see the action. And what do they see? They see like user A cooked something, cooked a recipe. Or if, for some reason, so recipe may not be a good example of what I'm going to talk about, but let's take a music application, for example. You could see stuff on your newsfeed saying that, hey, your friend A listened to a song. But if the song is still playing, it will say your friend is listening to the song. So the way we do this is to allow you to put tenses in your app. So here you have, up there, the past tense, cooked, and down here, the present tense is cooking. And you tell Facebook how it looks like, okay? And we use the durations of the action to determine whether we should use the past or the present tense. What we require is that you start in English, and then you translate this in whatever language you distribute your app to. But it needs to be in English in design. And at the end here, you specify what we call the attachment layout. And we have 3 attachment layouts for you to pick from. And those are layouts of how they will look like how the story will look like in newsfeed or in tickers. So whenever we show the story, like someone cooks something, is it a number, is it a map, or is it an item that has a picture of the object? The default is good here. So let's save now and move on to the next screen, which is the object definition screen. Object, it's a recipe. We'll just keep it simple. Here, what you can do is add properties. You could say that your recipe has some properties that are extended, such as, I don't know, some ingredients, or they're attached to a restaurant, for example, or you found in a book or whatever. And you could add other properties. And the more properties you add, the richer the story will be rendered on Facebook, and the more interesting it will be, and the more engaging it will be. So, think about adding properties to have more metadata as long as it's useful for the user. So we'll just keep the defaults. And in the default, there are a few mandatory properties that are the URL. So where does the object live on the web? The title, we need a title, like the name of the object. An image, so we can show a thumbnail, and a description as well. Okay. So I won't go into all the details. We saved the changes. Next up, aggregations. So aggregations, if you remember, is how stories of your applications appear in users' timeline. And the way you configure this is that you create groupings. And first, you say what type of data you want to display. Do you want to display groupings based on recipes or based on the action which is cooked? If I want to list a sum of, a count of all the actions you cooked, then, all the recipes you cooked, I would choose the cook action as a grouping criteria. If I just want to have a sum of all the singular unique recipes and list them, like I cooked lasagna X time, I cooked pancakes X times, you will group on recipe, okay? So let's have default of cook. Will just show up a number, so we'll have an aggregation unit that shows the number of times I cooked on this app. And item to show, I'll show the most recent because it doesn't make, if we're gonna group all the cooks, we'll only have one line, so it doesn't matter which type of item I show. And I can create a aggregation title. And what number do I show? We have, or we can just show count here. There's a pseudo language that you can use, and it's describing in the doc, so you can pull out some properties from objects, etc. So here we'll just show a number of times we cooked on this app. And save changes and finish. So we're just exiting the wizard. We're done with the configuration. So we've created our action type. We've created our object type. We've created aggregation unit layouts. Now we have to do what? We have to tag an object at least. Because once we have the object, we can start publishing action. The way you do that, it's pretty simple. You need a web page available somewhere, and we'll use a tool. And then you need to tag that web page with the tags that Facebook understands. And we help you by clicking on this button, Get Code, on the right. You have, like pre-filled meta tag template that you can use. So here you see that there's an application ID. Content equals 3500. That's the application ID of this app. And you have a property of type that is recipe. You have a URL that says put your own stuff here, and we'll have to change that. You have a title that is a sample recipe. That's the default value. You have a description that's also a default value. And we'll just use that, okay? We won't get fancy and try to put some interesting stuff. We just want to create an action and see the objects on timeline or user's Facebook account. So this page, because maybe you don't have a server available on the internet ready right away, what I've done is I have this little app. So if you go to that URL, I'm sorry for that. And what you will do is, you will type in a key. It's a unique ID. It could be your name. It could be anything. And this will create some kind of namespace unique to your application, so you can push some code in there. So I'll just put some random string, and here you have to type in the page name. This is the name that the page will look like on the web, and on the bottom you'll just copy and paste some tags. So what this will do is it will save this information and create a web page based on this for you, so you don't need a server. It's just a little hack for the purpose of the demo. Don't use this as a real website, and I don't want to host your data. So I'll just have a page called demo, and if I click save, it tells me that this page can now be accessed at the following URL. So if I click on the URL above, and I'll just open it in a new tab, you'll see that we have an empty page that shows up. And if you look at the page source, it contains whatever I've passed into the text box. Okay, but this is available on internet, and Facebook can go and scrap it. Facebook can go and get those tags for you. Before we go on and publish an action, we need to fix a few things. First thing is this thing here. Put your own URL here doesn't seem like a valid URL, does it? So let's fix that. So this is my URL here. I'll copy it to the clipboard, and I'll just modify this. So now the OG colon URL tag points to the place where this thing will be hosted. And we click save. Okay, let's see if this is a valid Open Graph object hosted on the web. So how do we test that? We can use our eyes, like most people do, just go and check the value. Or we can use the Open Graph object debugger that Facebook provides. If you go to your Open Graph app, in the dev app, you have some links here. And you have two links that are interesting that we'll use. Use debug tools and use Graph API Explorer. So let's start with the debug tool. And I think I've passed time, so we'll just finish this quickly. The debug tool opens here, and it asks me to input a URL, and I'll just copy the URL that I've created and that the app hosted for me. I click debug, and then Facebook will go and scrap, or will go and parse that page, and gives you information about that. And here it says errors that need to be fixed. And I don't think we see it very well at the back, but it's red. And red is bad, okay? You want yellow, you want blue. Blue is kind of a cool color, I think. So it tells you that the object as this URL is invalid because the application is not associated with that domain name. So let's fix that. The domain name is, I'm sorry for my hack application, it's called clownapp.net. So we need to tell Facebook that, hey, this application is hosted in this place, and it's okay to use this URL. So we'll go back to the dev app, where you have the configuration for the application. You click on Setting. I'll just leave that page. I don't remember what I had. And here you enter, first you need to enter a website. And I think that it requires HTTP. And you also say that you want the app domain of this application to be the same. Okay? These must match. If they don't match, then we will error out. And when you're done, you go down, click Save Changes, go back to the debugger again, click Debug again, see if it starts screaming. No, it doesn't. And it gives you information about whatever it found on the page. So it says that, yeah, there's an app ID, and here's the app ID. And of course, you remember. That's your number, right? You remember it by heart. There's URL, type, title, which is sample recipe. That's because we didn't modify it. Invalid image, because we didn't specify anything, but that's cool. Now, we've modeled our data. We've created aggregation units. We've tagged an object. What do we do now? Let's create an action. Let's publish an action. And we'll end with that. So normally, you would do that by code in your application. But we don't want to type. We want to use some pre-canned stuff. So let's use the other tool that I talked about. And it's down here. It's called the Graph API Explorer. OK? So I'll click on that. I need to remember my namespace as well. So here's my namespace, ArabNet-Dev. Open this in a new tab. I end up in this thing called Graph API Explorer, where you can choose applications that you own, generate token, and also make calls to the graph. So let's choose the, well, actually, I'm already on the ArabNet application that I just created. And you see that the text box that says access token, it's empty, because I've never, as a user, because I'm the admin of the app, but I'm also a user on Facebook. I've never authenticated the application. I never told Facebook, hey, you know what? It's OK for this application to do stuff on my behalf. So generally, you will make API calls to do that. But with Graph Explorer, you can just go and click this button here and explicitly access some permissions. The only permission that is needed for Open Graph is the one called Publish Action in the extended permissions. So I click Publish Actions. I click Get Access Token. And here you have the standard permissions dialog that you know and made me not laugh so much. But, and you can log into Facebook. If you click Log into Facebook, what you do is you authorize the application. You give permission to this application to do stuff. And you do have an access token now. With an access token, you can do stuff on behalf of the user. So it's super critical to get the authentication piece right and get access tokens. Now, let's start publishing some actions. So I said that making a call to Graph API, at least publishing an action, it's a post action. The URL is graph.facebook.com/me. And now we have to type in the action name. And the action name is the namespace followed by the action type name. Okay? So I said I want to cook. And what do I want to cook? I'll just add a field. I want to cook a recipe. And which recipe do I want to cook? I'll just grab the URL where I put my object, this one here, which is valid because we've tested against the object debugger, right? We know it's valid. And I'll pass the URL name here. So this is kind of, a way to make calls to Facebook Graph. And we'll click on Submit. And if I did everything right, I get an ID back. So there you go. I've just published an action that resides on this ID. Now, if I go to my Facebook page, Facebook, go to my timeline view, and we have something we call the activity log. I can go and click the activity log that records everything that happened on my account. And I go down, and here you see, 5:44 p.m., I cooked a sample recipe on ArabNet, which is kind of bad wording, but it gives you, the context of what I wanted to show. Very simple. One tip, if I click on the date here, I see the story as it would appear on my friend's newsfeed, okay? Image is not good because I didn't specify anything. Description is kind of crappy because I didn't specify anything. So you see that the story here doesn't look good because I didn't do my job at providing good information. I'm done. Thanks for listening, and I hope that you'll all build superb open graph apps tonight. You guys don't call this a hack. I'll just call this a hack. Overnight competition with super prizes. And I think we'll come by and give a helping hand if you guys want. So stay tuned and, good hacking. Q&A for those who wants to stay here. I'm sorry, oh no, I am? I think I had the time jet lag on my phone. Okay, sorry, Q&A. So anyone wants to ask questions? Yes, the gentleman over there, and I don't know if we have a mic. Yes, we do.
Let's say, translation for the word action, the action word cook.
So how do I translate these actions? I just click on this link here that says translate your app. So there are two steps. Both are your responsibility. The first one is that objects need to be translated. And we don't know objects. You know objects because you've created them. And you will have to, and we do have some meta tags like OG, local, and local alternate. So what you'll do is you tell us that, hey, I support this and this and this language in addition to English. And whenever you publish an action, we'll go and parse the page and say, oh, this guy wants this and this language in addition. So we'll call again, parsing a query string parameter, saying that now I want, whatever language. So this is the first step. The second step is translate actions. And how you do that, you go to this translate your app link. I have to say I'm not really proud of this UI, but it's what we have today. And basically what happens is that we will provide you with every string that we know from your application that we've crafted up based on, past tense, present tense, recipe, he cooked, she cooked, they cooked, my friends and 5 of them cooked, and all the strings that we generate are there, and you can translate them in the language that you support. And we have like templating that you can do, so you can reuse some words and you can have like replacing some known words, and that's how you do it. Yeah, so the languages are these ones. We've got a bunch of them. We also have like my preferred one is, I know the Americans like Star Trek. They have the Klingon language. We have pirate language. We have some funky stuff. So this is one thing, and translation is done partly by you on everything that is really valuable to you, like the main language you want to support. And this is also plugged into our crowdsourcing translation engine, so your users can also go and contribute to translation. So if you have Klingon friends, point them to the URL so that they can translate your app in Klingon. Other questions? Oh, at the back over there. I'm sure people at the front also have questions, so we'll come back later on the front.
Hi there, thanks a lot. Great presentation.
Thank you.
This is more a comment about sort of our experience with Facebook rather than a question per se. But I'm one of the founders of Istakana. It's a streaming video website for premium Arabic content. And right from the start, which is actually a year ago, we launched at ArabNet last year, we went very heavy into integrating Facebook, and so you can log in, you can comment, you can like, etc., etc. And then in August, we got our videos white labeled, so they can be played within Facebook and people can share them directly. And about 3-4 days ago, we finished our implementation for the Open Graph. And I have to say that at every step of the way, Facebook is now such a crucial source of traffic and buzz for us that, you know, anyone who's thinking about it, you really shouldn't. You should just go ahead and do it, because it's a fantastic infrastructure and it really does work. So, you know, very positive experience from our side. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. And we do see that every day, where referrals from Facebook to third-party websites, and especially third-party apps, is growing increasingly, and we consider that's our job to do, help you succeed by referring users to you, and not anonymous users, you know, real users. Yeah, one question at the front, and there's another one up there afterwards.
Does Facebook have any plans for working on its Arabic search capabilities? As more and more content is, for practical purposes, is being stuffed into the Facebook platform, it's becoming harder to find, you know, what we're looking for.
Yeah, so there are several parts to this question. So we already have some kind of search for searching people or searching applications in that search bar up there. Whether we want to continue, you know, the work on that, extending it or removing it, it's speculation that I will not. I'm not making any announcements here, so I'm sorry, I will not.
Will there be ever a capability to search within the pages themselves?
Yeah, we have that already, and of course we'll try to make it better, but I can't comment on any future plans.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Karen from Tor. Just to clarify, so anonymous users aren't real users?
Or not?
Just, you said anonymous users, not real users. So.
Yeah, so there are different things. Maybe I didn't explain myself. Wow, this is kind of echoey.
Just saying, there's a lot of people who need anonymity to stay safe.
Yeah, I prefer this one. So for us, so there's two things. There's users. So there's the Facebook identity, which we'd like, and we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that those are real users, not, you know, people create Facebook profiles for their dogs, or they have their professional profile and their private profile, or they just make up profiles that don't exist as real people. We don't want that, because we believe strongly in the value of people doing stuff with their own identity on the Facebook platform, and this is why we think that we have a strong platform, because it's real users. It's not someone that doesn't have a real existence. Or so that's one thing. The other thing that when I talked about anonymous versus non-anonymous is when a user is logged into Facebook, we know who he is, and when we refer traffic to your site, to your application, there are two situations that occur. Either that user has already authorized the application, so they've seen that dialog box that says this applications want to do this and this and that, and they click OK. At that point, they authorize the application, and whenever we redirect the user to your application, you can log in the user automatically. And at that point, that user becomes not just a unique visitor on the web that you don't really know who he is. It becomes a Facebook user that has a name, that has friends, that can do stuff on Facebook, they like things, and you have contact information about that. And we believe that authenticated users have more value in terms of for your application than a user where you don't even know who they are, where they come from, and what their name is. That's what I meant by anonymous versus non-anonymous, and that's why I said that that anonymous users, are not useful. Not that they are not useful, but that you have less information about them. So they're less useful. I don't know if it's kind of fuzzy, but one more at the end.
Hi, I'm the founder of a game portal called GameTaco.com. We had an experience with Facebook where we had a competition on our website, and our users log in using Facebook Connect. We had them vote on the games that they find the most fun, and through that we would give the game developer a cash prize at the end of the month. The problem that we started facing is that a lot of
like real cash?
Yeah, real cash. The problem with that is that we found people create fake Facebook accounts and log in and vote. And actually, we found this as a trend with a lot of marketing, new media marketing firms, where they buy users from groups that basically you can get 1,000 like by paying $50. And this is actually making us think twice about creating more activity like that on Facebook. So what do you think is the solution for us to take that would get rid of that?
So there are several parts to the question. The first part is that we do deactivate accounts a lot, and we'll double the effort, and we'll make sure that we will. It's always a catch-up game because we know that people will create fake accounts. So it's a catch-up game, but we will continue to work in deleting those. There's also something else, which is for brands. And I don't know if there's any marketeers here. I don't really work with brands myself because I work with app developers mostly. But I see a trend where brands try to build those campaigns to build up likes. Like, the most like I have, the better it is. So what? You have lots of like. What do you use them for? Yeah, voting on websites, and then so what? So I engage you to think beyond that, and I think that with timeline for brands, we're moving a step beyond that, because some of the practices that were done before will become kind of obsolete, and it's going to become harder and harder to have those, pointing to the like button and stuff like that. So that's two different things, and then from a value standpoint. Fake accounts, it's like they don't have that many friends. They don't have many likes. They don't have a lot of activities. In terms of targeting for ads, in terms of value they bring to your application, it's pretty low. So I think that even though that may exist for some time and it's a catch-up game for us, at the end, it doesn't provide any value to any application or any brand. So we're hoping that practice will try to, and I don't know, hopefully it's gonna go away. But we'll continue to fight hard to delete those accounts. And there are signals that we know, and we continue to improve our machine learning capability, improve the proactive stuff that we do to delete accounts. And you know what? You guys can help. So if you have friends that have fake accounts, and I'll do it every day, and my former colleagues from another company start to hate me now because it's their professional account, and they use that to recruit clients and such, and I'll just report them because it doesn't bring any value to anyone.
Hi, my name is Alex. I have a question. At what stage? Here I am. Hi.
I saw you earlier.
At what stage does a registered profile become an inactive user? Is there something like activity degrees, or I come from the online gaming area, and there are companies out there. They say they claim to have 150 million users. Well, what is the sense in saying that if they don't play?
Yeah, so I don't know when we deactivate profiles, but we communicate on numbers that are like active users versus deactivated profiles. I think Amina has something to say.
Yeah, on the gaming side, typically when you talk to companies, the way that they should be talking about their activity is monthly active users or daily active users. Those are the two measures that are probably the most common across the board. And so when you hear people tell you they've got 150 million active, monthly active, that gives you a sense of the timing. I think, you know, if people are talking more generally about the number of users they have, just dig in and get MAU or DAU. That's really what it's about in that field.
I'm addressing not individually only the gaming sphere. I'm just asking myself, is there a corporate policy of deactivating account, and can you comment on that?
Yeah, so I actually don't have I don't actually know the answer to that. So we can take a look. But you know, when you hear Facebook talk about stats and talk about the number of users, we'll typically talk about monthly active users. When you talk about sort of specific activities, so on the Open Graph side, when you build an application, we'll actually give you, you know, daily active users that are actively publishing actions. So typically we'll try to be very, very specific, so that'll give you a sense of exactly what's going on. Your specific question I actually don't have the answer to. Sure.
Yeah, but we don't talk about registered users. It doesn't have sense for us.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, I'm sorry, here. Oh, yeah.
My name is Manal, or the Manalist. Just I wanted to ask a follow-up question about what he asked before for fake accounts. Is there any plans or any way to actually verify accounts? Like, you said that fake accounts would not have many friends or activities, but if the user chose to have his whole account private, then you wouldn't know a fake account from a real account, right? So is there any way to actually have a verified account, like, you know, Twitter accounts? A verified account is someone who has paid for advertising or a celebrity who is known. So maybe a way that even if the user chose to have a private account, it would show you, like, has the account been active for a while? It will show you that it will have a set of rules that you would only get that verified account badge sort of thing if you've been on Facebook for over a period, or if you've used certain applications. It wouldn't tell us what are the rules are or on what basis you got it, but just rather that this is a verified person who is actually active rather than someone who's just created the account to vote on a campaign.
Yeah, so we do have a concept of verified accounts, but I'm not sure we expose that to you right now. And for us, a verified account is like, there are several criteria, but one of them could be, you know, just enter a credit card number and we know it's not a dog, or it's just someone that has lots of credit card numbers. Yeah, so there's a lot of people that don't. Yeah. So that's why I said that's one of the many criteria we have. But it's a good feedback. I think we need to nail that down, and it's part of our day-to-day fight as well to get rid of those fake accounts. So yeah, it's a good feedback. And maybe I don't know what time it is. We can take a last one, maybe. Yeah.
Test. Okay. What I want to ask is to go up to the beginning when you were saying that at first when they introduced the Facebook app, it was very light and it wasn't what users were expecting. So afterwards, when they actually developed the thing, it was more interactive and they could do many other things. So what I want to ask is that professionals who use, for example, Facebook to promote events through ads or brands and such, we don't actually have an application on Facebook mobile that allows, let's say, marketers to use the Facebook ads option, for example, in order to modify their campaigns through their mobile. So it's kind of a frustrating thing every time we want to modify something to go back to the desktop in order to modify it and then come back.
It's a great feedback. Yeah, you're right. We don't have that capability right now. But as we invest more in mobile, maybe this is something that we'll work on. So I'm not saying, you know, whether it's on the plan or not, but yeah, it's a great feedback. So thanks for listening and staying up late. So we'll just wrap up, and I'll stay here a while if you guys wanted to add more questions. Thank you.